Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Storytime. I'm so happy you could make it today. We've got 10 more suspenseful stories for you to listen to. From experiences home alone to walking in the woods at night, these are stories you're sure to enjoy. And also, if you haven't followed me on my social media, then make sure you do that. You can see it on the top of the video right now. There, I upload exclusive things, extra videos, extra content that I don't normally upload here, so if you'd like to go check those things out, make sure you do that. And lastly, as I've mentioned before, we do have merchandise, so if you'd like to see that too, make sure you check that out. But other than that, sit back, relax, and let's go for some adventures, shall we? Number 1. So, this happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. Looking back on it, it may have just been a series of coincidences, and even a little too much overthinking. But in that moment this strange encounter happened, I was pretty concerned. With that, let me give you some background information before going on to the experience. I'm currently 19 years old. I'm living in a small apartment with another roommate. It so happened that this specific weekend, my roommate Jenny was going out of town. She was going to visit family, so it was just me looking after her cat, Sarah. It was a warmer than usual day in July, and since our air conditioning wasn't working well, I decided I would go over to my friend Walter's house. He had air conditioning, and a pool too, so why not? At around noon, I called my friend Walter, and I told him I would go over to his house. I leave the house and lock everything up, and then I make my way over there. Since my car was getting work done on it, I took my bicycle with me. I had one of those bicycles that has a little basket in the front. That's where I put Sarah, and we both made our way over to Walter's house. Yes, I brought Sarah with me. I wasn't going to leave the poor thing back at the apartment. Now, the way to get to my friend Walter's house is pretty interesting to say the least. Since I live in a larger than average town, you can imagine how many different ways there are to get around here. You can get around using the streets, taking the scenic routes, alleyways, and even some woods in the middle of the town. I always liked going into the woods area because it provided an amazing escape from traffic and the sounds too. The main selling point for me was all the shade the trees would provide. It's about a 30-minute ride through the woods, and it goes by a small lake and a large field. Me and Sarah get through the woods without any problems, but I did notice a group of people who sat amongst the trees. I didn't mind them too much at the time, but one of them did yell out to me and say, "Hey, we better not see you around these part of the woods again. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay out." I didn't pay too much attention to it, but I did find it strange. The reason I found it strange was they didn't look like they were camping out there. In fact, it looked like they'd been living out there, especially by the clothing they had. The town I lived in didn't really have too much happen in it, but over the last few months, there has been an increase in people having their things taken from them. Of course, it mainly happened during the nighttime, so I wasn't really worrying too much. That group of individuals? Well, don't forget them. They'll come into play a little bit later on in the story. Anyways, we arrive at Walter's house about 10 minutes after we exit the woods. Once there, I put what I encountered in the back of my mind. I proceeded to enjoy the wonderful air conditioning. After going swimming in the pool, eating ice cream, and watching movies, it's now around 10 p.m. I'm getting pretty tired at this point, and Walter offers to drop me off at home. I thank him for the offer, but I tell him no. By this point at night, it's a cool 65 degrees, compared to the 88 degrees from earlier in the daytime. So I excuse myself for the night and I make my way back home. My plan was to take the streets to get back home, but that would have taken me longer. Of course, this wouldn't be like your typical encounter had I not taken the way that takes you through the woods. Man, I wish I wasn't so naive going that way. The problem with going there at night compared to the daytime was obviously the lighting. The woods didn't really have too many street lamps, and the ones that were there along the trails weren't exactly working too well. At this point, I'd already forgotten about the group from earlier, so I wasn't expecting too much. Sarah was asleep in the basket as I made my way through. Soon enough, I saw a couple that was walking their dog just exiting. I said to them, "Hello, good evening. I was wondering, did the two of you see any suspicious people inside the woods?" They told me that it was just the two of them out there and they hadn't gone that far in. Apparently, they'd only been in the woods for about 15 minutes. Alright, whatever, I thought. I continued to make my way through, and I'm now in the middle of the woods. By now, it's close to 10:20 p.m., and there's literally nothing but dark trees and night sky above me. Out of all times, I start getting a pain in my leg, and I take a quick little break to calm down. While I sat there on my bicycle uneventfully for a few minutes, I start seeing a light making its way through the trees near me. As the light got closer, it suddenly vanished, just like that. That was then followed by the sounds of light footsteps as they're making their way through the woods. Again, I try to tell myself I was overreacting. Alright, calm down. Probably just another couple walking around or something. Just relax. But when I really thought about it, who in the world walks at almost 10:30 at night, especially in the middle of the woods? Regardless, I now continue along my way. As I'm doing so, now it's my foot that's hurting. See, I forgot to mention this earlier. When I was swimming, I think I might have landed wrong when jumping into the water. It didn't really hurt me that bad at the time, but I guess with all the movement from the bicycle, it really did start to bother me. Still, it was late and I needed to get home. I get off the bicycle for a little bit and push it down the trail for a while. Again, nothing was happening. That's until I just so happened to look to my side. I see what looked like a shadow of a person, and then another shadow running behind some of the trees. That's when the alarm started going off in my head. I now knew in that very moment I wasn't alone there. I think Sarah had sensed something too, because she started hissing and making a lot of noise as to warn me about something. I take out my phone ready to call someone, but as soon as I turn the light from the phone and move it to a tree, that's when I see two people just standing there. I'll tell you right now, I didn't take a long look, but from what I could tell, they looked very familiar. In that moment, I tried to think about where I had seen them. Then instantly, I remembered the group from earlier in the daytime. Here were two of them, and from what little light I did have, I could see they each were holding some sort of blade in their hands. I'm not sure where the pain from earlier went, but in those brief moments, I disregarded the pain and me and Sarah take off. I could hear the sounds of footsteps and yelling as I'm making my way out of there. The entire time, I was just hoping my legs wouldn't give up on me. By some miracle, I was able to make it out of there, though they really didn't give up on chasing me. Eventually, as I got to a more populated part of town, I now noticed they were nowhere to be found. Honestly, I was too concerned to go home because I thought maybe they would have followed me back to my apartment. If they did, they may have tried to get inside. Either way, I was so tired from everything that happened that as soon as I got home and locked the doors and windows, I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I called my friend Walter and roommate Jenny, and I told them about everything that happened. For some reason, I waited a few days before I called officers, and then I told them about it. I was a really shy person, so I didn't want them thinking I was just making it up. As it so happened, they actually found a group of people who had been in the woods at nighttime. They were actually able to connect them with other occurrences of people having their things taken. Since all of that did happen, I refused to go in that area, especially at night. More than anything, I'm just happy I had Sarah there with me. She seemed to have sensed something, and if it wasn't for her, who knows? Number 2. This story is a little bit different than the others. There is this mystery to it. It's really had me paranoid for the last couple of days. I'm a 24-year-old who lives in a small town in England, and I've been living in this home for about 2 years now. So to tell you this story properly, let me first explain what happened. Over the past couple of weeks, I'd started to notice strange things happening around the house. For example, I noticed things that were out of place. If I'd been cleaning the backyard the other day, my broom and even my lawnmower would be in different places. Trash and other belongings I would leave outside would be moved around and placed somewhere else. Another thing I had also started to notice were the sounds and noises that would happen during the nighttime. I'm not really somebody who gets easily awakened by the sounds at night, so for me to be hearing these things really did have me alert. At first, it started off as knocking on the windows, but then it escalated to hearing walking around the house. Now, I live in a small town and live in an area where the neighbors are pretty far. Surrounding my house were woods everywhere you look. Obviously, the explanation I had was maybe it was some sort of curious animal. Who knows? Maybe they were looking for food. I did find it strange because I've been living here for the past 2 years. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Even with all the noises and strange occurrences, I tried not to worry myself too much. That paranoia? Well, it was something I believe saved me the other night. So, on this afternoon, I was heading to work per usual. I normally work in the mornings at a grocery store, but one of my coworkers couldn't make it to work in the afternoon. Because of this, I received a call from my manager. Hey, Amanda called in saying she couldn't make it to work. I know you don't work today, but could you come in and work tonight? We would really appreciate it. It was extra money, and I was actually looking at earning a little more money myself. After all, I was saving to buy a new car, and I could use the money. So I take my bicycle to work and arrive like normal. I go through the normal routine, and I get off at work at around 9:30 p.m. By the time we close the store and I leave, it's now around 10 p.m. at night. It's about a 20-minute bicycle ride through some nature and some woods. I'll admit, the town at night turns into the complete opposite of what you find in the morning. The once beautiful, busy streets, filled with people and families, turns into an abandoned town at night. It was a little bit eerie, but I'd been out on my own before at nighttime, so I really didn't worry too much. As I make my way back, I'd begun to notice something strange while going down a familiar trail. A trail that leads to my house had what looked to be tracks from boots. It had rained a little bit while I was at work, but nothing to the point where it was muddy on the ground. It wouldn't have been a problem had somebody just been walking around going somewhere else. But the thing is, these footprints were leading right to my house. No one had any reason to be going out there. I didn't see any tire tracks, so it's not like somebody drove there. Besides, my family lived about 2 hours from where I was staying, and I know I wasn't expecting any friends tonight either. Immediately, I started to panic, thinking there might have been somebody hiding somewhere near my house, or even worse, they might have already been inside and they were waiting for me. I told myself I was overreacting and continued on the remaining few minutes to my house. When I got there, I noticed the muddy tracks were all around the house. My fence in the backyard, it was now open, and that's when I knew something wasn't right. As I was looking towards the house, I saw a light. That was followed by the sounds of footsteps running around the backyard. Immediately, I did the smart thing. I got out of there and I called officers. I explained the situation to them, and they arrived about 10 minutes later. This wasn't actually the first time this has happened. I've called complaining about this, so they took it very seriously. They checked outside the house and now noticed that one of the windows was broken. In fact, there were footprints all over the carpet and floors, and lots of mud too. The strange part about everything was not only was no one found, but nothing was taken. Since then, officers have been driving around the area at night, and I had a friend stay over at my house for a few days. Nothing else happened until one night that made me decide I didn't want to stay there anymore. By this point, my friend had gone back home, so I figured that everything had settled down. As I was cleaning the dishes the other night, I happened to look outside my window. I had my lights on inside, so it was difficult to see out there, but what I saw sent me into my room and calling officers once again. I see a person in a dark hoodie looking right back at me. He then began knocking on the windows, and that's when I grabbed a baseball bat and I went upstairs. When officers arrived, they once again checked the entire area, but they found nothing. I'm now staying over at my friend's house, and I'm retelling you all of this that happened. If anything does happen, I'll be sure to let you know. But for now, officers are staying in the area, and they're checking to see if this stranger will return. Number 3. Alright, so to start my story off, I'll go ahead and give you some background context. At the time this all took place, I was 17 years old. That would make me a senior in high school. My family and I had been moving from town to town for the past 10 years or so I never really was able to have too many friends. But luckily for me, I had my brother Edward. We were super close. He was 2 years younger than me, but we were always into the same things. We both enjoyed playing video games together. We loved superhero movies, and something else we loved was exploring. I guess that was one of the plus sides about moving around so much. We were able to see so many different landscapes and so many towns. This town we had moved into was just outside of Big Bear, and it was beautiful. Nothing but woods, lakes, nice people, and cool temperatures. Little did we know that our curiosity for exploring would end up getting us into quite the story. So one Friday night, me and Edward were feeling pretty bored. Mom and Dad had gone out of town, so it was just me and Edward looking after the house. We had our puppy Evelyn with us, so she kept us company. At around 8 p.m., after we ordered a pizza and watched some movies, we decided to take Evelyn for a walk. That and also to walk the pizza we just had. If you're curious, it was cheese pizza, my personal favorite. As we make our way down our neighborhood, we run into a couple of people who had been walking outside. We recognized them as one of the neighbors we were pretty close with. They told us they'd seen somebody walking around the woods, and they seemed to be acting suspiciously. They mentioned something that had happened the other night, and it really sort of made me and my brother feel like we shouldn't be walking out there. If you're going to be walking little Evelyn tonight, I highly recommend you avoid the woods. Me and my wife were walking there the other night when we noticed we were being followed. They wore all dark clothing and seemed to be making a bunch of strange sounds. They even threw rocks at us. I didn't report it since I thought it was just some random person playing a joke, but just be careful nonetheless. We thanked them for the heads up and we continue our walk. Honestly, me and my brother were both very brave young high schoolers. We weren't going to let some little story get to us. I mean, how bad could it be, right? I sure wish we weren't so naive. We arrive at a small park that heads into a trail into the woods, then we proceed to walk with no problems. By now it's about 8:30 p.m. and we haven't seen or heard anything. Honestly, I was thinking our neighbor was the one playing a joke on us. Satisfied with the walk and seeing as Evelyn was looking pretty tired, we start making our way back. As we're walking with the little light available, we start hearing the sounds of people talking. I told my brother to be quiet as we listened in. As I mentioned earlier, Evelyn was still a little baby, but she started whining and crying. She's only done this when she wanted something like a treat. I wasn't expecting that's what she wanted now. In that moment, we were sure she was warning us about something. Edward, tell me I wasn't the only one that just heard that? No, I heard that too. It sounded like people whispering, right? Although we had heard the noise, we calmed ourselves down and continued. As we started walking again, the noises started. The sounds of branches breaking, leaves being stepped on, whispering, Evelyn whining. It was all becoming too much to handle. One quick look to my side confirmed everything that we'd been hearing. At the corner of my eye, I saw two very tall people, wearing what I was assuming to think were dark hoodies. I didn't say anything to my brother yet, because if we reacted right away, they might have tried something. As far as they knew, they had no idea that I had noticed them. I don't think any normal person just follows you around at night, especially in the woods. Still, the urge to get out of there was necessary. The best thing to do now was just to walk faster. I tell my brother, "Hey, let's have a competition. The last one to make it home has to buy ice cream for the other tomorrow." Genius thinking if I do say so myself. We take off running as fast as we can, making it out of the woods with no more occurrences. That of course changes as soon as we're home. By now we put our walk in the woods behind us and we put on another movie. We were in the living room minding our own business. Suddenly I get the urge to get some milk and cookies from the kitchen. All the lights were off in the house, minus a few night lights here and there, so I couldn't really see too much. The only thing I could really see was the glow of the television. When I was in the kitchen, I started hearing the sounds of footsteps outside in the backyard. The first thing I was thinking was maybe Edward had taken the dog outside. But here's the thing. When I looked towards the living room, he sat on the couch with Evelyn fast asleep next to him. The next thing I thought about that sent a chill was the two we had seen from earlier. I remembered them in that instant and thought it might have been them. I didn't want to look out the window because I was concerned they were there. They may have seen me. I was hopeful that none of the windows were open, so quickly I walk over to Edward and I explain everything that's going on. We then go upstairs quietly and go inside one of the rooms. From there, we open up the attic and we hide inside. Immediately, I knew we had to call someone. The thing is, my phone was charging at the time, so I left it on the counter in the living room. Great, out of all times. Thankfully, Edward had his phone in his pocket, and he called. He only had about 5% left on his phone, so we made the call short and sweet. The dispatcher on the other line told us to wait there, and officers would soon show up. For what seemed like an eternity, we waited as we heard the sounds of kicking on the doors, and even continued footsteps and arguing outside. Although it was hard to understand what the two of them were saying out there, it sounded like they were leaving. We start hearing as the talking is getting quieter, and we no longer hear them. About 5 minutes later, we hear the familiar sounds of sirens and officers arriving. They tell us they'll search the surrounding area, but so far nothing. They did find a bunch of footprints and would look to be a bump in the door. Obviously, I'm not 100% sure if those people from the woods were the ones responsible, but we haven't heard anything else happen. Whether they were some bored teenagers, or they were truly up to no good, I guess we still don't know. Number 4. So, to start off, this happened back in December of 2014. I was 19 years old at the time, living in a small town in Germany. Me and my friend Lauren had just finished our college finals. We thought as a way to celebrate the incoming winter break, we would go and celebrate by going to one of the fancy restaurants in town. We had finished our last final at around 3 p.m. Then we proceeded to go to a restaurant that we always love going to. After some delicious food, we were feeling especially adventurous. We wanted to go to some nearby mountains to see the view of the town. The only thing about this place is that not many people go up there. We would soon find out why. In order to get there, we had to drive about an hour up winding, lonely roads, and these were surrounded by woods on either side. Once we got to a parking area, we walked through the wilderness until we make it to the clearing that overlooks the entire town. It was a little bit of a walk, but it was perfect. The view up there, it was something you didn't want to miss. By now it's close to 4:30 p.m., and there is very little light out, so the race was on to get to the other side. We run through this nature area, and we arrived just in time for the sunset. It was perfect. That was, of course, until our walk back to the car. You see, in order to get to this place, you had to go over this long little bridge. It crosses a river in the middle of the woods. There wasn't really anything too interesting about it, but on the way back, that would soon change. I think we may have underestimated the little bit of light we had to work with. because now it was difficult to see around us. The little light our phones provided wasn't really doing too much for our situation. As we approached the bridge, I had started to hear the sounds of mumbling and talking. Me and Lauren looked around us expecting to find somebody, but we had seen nothing. We looked towards the bridge. That's where we see somebody stumbling around up there. They're just walking back and forth. I hadn't actually seen anyone myself, but Lauren did mention something. "Hey Lauren, did something happen? What's wrong?" "Well, I'm not really surprised we're the only ones out here." "What do you mean by that?" "I know I should have said something, but when we were walking over the bridge, I did notice that somebody was following us up here. I happened to look back and it appeared like he was holding something sharp in his hand. It was hard to tell what he had due to the lighting, but honestly, I was just hoping he was just some random person walking." "Thanks for the advice, Lauren. A little too late." "Great. Now we have this random person out here who knows what he has with him. He's stopping us from getting back to our car, which was our ticket out of there. This river was pretty deep, so going across from the bottom wasn't going to be easy. Also, it runs pretty far up and down. We don't know where there's another way to go to the other side of the woods. Besides, if we get lost with this possible lunatic out there, what's going to happen?" It was something I didn't really want to think about. Left with few other options, we now make our way up the river away from this person. Surely there had to be another way out. Time was definitely not on our side. It's already dark out here to begin with, and to make matters worse, the phone reception isn't exactly the best. To top everything off, our phones were low on battery. You see, we hadn't had a chance to charge them since we had already been out for most of the daytime. I had about 17% left, and Lauren probably had less than 10%. With the light application open, we sure didn't have much time. Walking up the river in almost complete darkness was an incredibly unforgettable experience. Knowing that at any time somebody might just jump out from the trees really did make us nervous. I wouldn't lie if I said I started crying thinking about it. All we could hear right now was the sound of the river and animals around us. With the light we had on our phones, I so happened to look over to the other side of the river. I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I now see that not only the stranger from earlier was following us there, but now he was joined by two others. This was truly turning into a bad dream. There hadn't been any sign of any way over there, and now we're thinking we might get lost. Something else I kept thinking about was that at any time they might try swimming over and making their way over to us. I don't think they would have done that, but it was a possibility. I should also mention that they never said anything the entire time. They just kept up pace with us without saying a single word. It was now or never. We had to come up with a plan and fast. Otherwise, who knows? Lauren recommends we turn our lights off to save the battery, and we should walk in the dark. I thought it sounded crazy, but then it would make it difficult for the others to see us. From the looks of things, they seem to be sharing one light, so we might be able to trick them and get out. We both turn off our lights and proceed to come up with our strategy. We pretend to run forward into the tree line ahead of us. Then we throw rocks ahead of us to make it sound like we continued running. Somehow it seemed to work. They believed we were still running forward, even though we had stopped to hide. As we can see their only light getting dimmer, we now run back down the way we had arrived. We still hadn't noticed anything yet, and we soon arrived back at the bridge. Now it was our chance to get over. As quickly and as quietly as we do, we get over and arrive on the other side. Now, with our car being just a few minutes away, we start making the run there. As we do, we now notice something. The light from earlier, it's now coming back towards us fast. They probably realize we tricked them, and that's why they're arriving back to us. We're out of there in no time. We thankfully arrive back to our car and we get inside. As we exit the parking lot area, we notice a dark van parked on the other side of the lot. We hadn't seen it earlier, so we just assumed it belonged to those three. We didn't stop. We went all the way back to campus and never did return. That area wasn't exactly too popular, and now we knew why. It could be possible that we stumbled upon something we weren't supposed to have seen. Who knows? I haven't heard anything else happen to anybody, so I'm not exactly sure who they were. Whether they were just visiting the area or they were living out there, I guess I won't know for sure. It's truly something we'll never forget. Number 5. This happened to me while on vacation in Hawaii. At the time, I'd taken a small vacation from work as I was running my own business. I sold and made art, and I was at a point in my life where I didn't always have to be at my little store. My cousins helped run my little store. I felt that now was the perfect time to relax. They told me they would look after things, and I took the opportunity to leave. Right away, as soon as I got out to the airport, things were already strange to begin with. To start off, my flight was delayed. It was a bummer, but it would only be the start of events that would take place on the island. Ultimately, it would make my vacation that much more miserable. Finally, after some delays and 8 hours of flying, I arrive in beautiful Hawaii. One thing I underestimated was the temperature and the humidity, because I'll tell you right now, there sure was a lot of that. Once I exit the airport, I make my way to a taxi. Then I get dropped off at the resort I was staying at. Once there, I checked in and I proceeded to relax. One thing I wanted to try on my own was exploring the mountains in the area. In fact, it was number 1 on my list. The following morning, I signed up for a tour guide, and they would take us around the island. We would go to all the popular sites. You know the ones: the beach, the ocean, small towns, and of course, what I was looking forward to, the mountains. One of the biggest rules our guide had was that we weren't to separate from the group, obviously. We were allowed to walk around, but we were to stay in sight. I think you can probably tell where this story is heading. We arrive at a small little fairground area for lunch, and after talking with some of the fellow people on the tour, we make our way up the mountain with the guide. As we're doing so, we're taking pictures, laughing, and talking amongst each other. We soon arrive to a ledge area where we can take pictures and walk around. Our guide told us we could walk around, but we would have to be back in 30 minutes. I was more of the shy person, so I didn't really talk to any of the other people. There were about 40 of us, so I don't think they realized I had walked away on my own. Honestly, I just wanted to see if I could get a better view of the mountains, but I think in my excitement of exploring, well, I ended up getting lost. Looking back, I wish I would have just stayed with the group, but no, I was just way too curious. While I was walking, I ended up tripping and falling over a little area where I got stuck. It was sort of like a little cavern. The problem was the rocks were very sharp and slippery, so climbing out wasn't exactly an easy option. I did notice a light towards the end and thought perhaps if I walked over there, I could find an exit. I was just thankful I hadn't really injured myself. As I walked on over and make it to the exit, I noticed now that there was yet another problem. There was no way of getting down from here either. It was essentially an opening on the side of the mountain. At this point, I had already been out here on my own for an hour or so, and it was already getting dark. My only option now was to start making my way back and try to climb out. As I arrived back to the opening, it of course had started to rain. This made the climbing that much more difficult and concerning. Thankfully for me, I had done some rock climbing before, so I was able to get out of there. Now that I was out of there, the next step was finding my way out of this nature area. Since I had already been out here for quite some time, I did find it difficult to make my way out. Due to the lighting, it was hard to get around there. I think I spent yet another hour trying to find my way out of there. By now, it was essentially nighttime, and I had no way of knowing exactly where I was heading. I really was nervous at this point. Here I was on this island, not even knowing where I was, and not even sure if anybody realized I was out here. To make matters worse, I was unfamiliar with the sort of wildlife out here. I sure didn't want to run into any snakes or even spiders. I was just feeling so down at that point. I kept thinking that I'd have to spend a night out here. Since I was tired, I found a tree to stay by and I waited there for a little while. I guess I was so tired because I actually ended up taking a nap. Soon, I was awoken by the sound of yelling and seeing lights in the distance. I wasn't sure what was going on as I was just waking up, but I soon realized something. There was a group of people looking for me. I guess they did realize I'd gone missing. Finally, after all of that time, a group of locals and people from the tour found me. They weren't exactly too happy that I wandered off on my own, but in the end, I was pretty sure they were more happy I was alright. Finally, after seeing a doctor, I make it back to the resort. From there, I spent the next couple of days back at that hotel and ended up leaving later on that week. In the end, it was quite the story to tell to my family and friends. I know it might not be as concerning as some of the other stories, but honestly, when you're lost in the wilderness, it's tough, I'll tell you that. This happened to me about a week ago. Just reliving the story sends me chills, but what really gets to me is thinking about what may have possibly happened to me. I was out in the mountains on my mountain bicycle, just enjoying the surrounding wilderness and the views. As some background, one awesome thing about the neighborhood I lived in was I wasn't too far away from a state park. This was where I did my normal routine of going on a bicycle and going down familiar trails. Usually I went in the morning right before work. Today, it being a Wednesday, I had a day off and decided to sleep in. I still wanted to go up into the mountains, but I had plenty of errands to take care of. I did some shopping and chores around the house, and once done, it was now around 4 p.m. This was in November, so there wasn't much sunlight left. Still, I wanted to get my training in. I get my bicycle and go into the state park. All was well. I hadn't really seen anyone, and I still had plenty of sunlight left. Even though I've been living in this area for a long time, there are certain trails I've actually never taken before. This was mainly because I was just so familiar with the ones I've gone on. From what I've heard from others walking out there, they tell me certain areas are very lonesome and the trails themselves are dangerous. It's mainly due to the fact that they are so narrow and right along the edge of the mountain. I was feeling especially adventurous today and decided to take one of these unfamiliar trails. I go down one trail and make my way up the mountain. It was true. Since this area was more difficult to maneuver, you really did see less people. It was definitely worth the view, though. I could see the sun as it started making its way behind a mountain. It was like something you would see in a postcard. Even with its beauty, it was still pretty eerie being the only one there. As I keep going, I notice a crossroad that is slowly approaching me. That's when I noticed someone who had been walking up there. It was nice to run into someone else, but at the same time, something was definitely off about him. When he saw me, he just stood there staring. I was thinking he would have gotten out of my way as I got closer, but he seemed to just stop right there in the middle of the trail. Finally, when I was just inches away, he gets out of the way and just smiles at me. All right, weird, but whatever. Finally, I made it to this clearing that gives you a perfect view of the sunset. It was truly amazing. By now, I had put the encounter from earlier behind me and instead focused on taking pictures. At this point, it's getting pretty late, and I decide it's time to go home and get some dinner started. I turned on the light on my bicycle and I start making my way back down. I continue down these narrow trails until once again I reached a familiar crossroads. When I get there, I grab my water bottle and I take a quick break. Right as I go to put my water bottle away, I started hearing the sounds of footsteps and branches breaking near me. I thought perhaps it may have been some sort of animal, but it turned out to be something else. I turn around and I see a familiar person just staring right back at me again. It was the man from earlier, but now he was wearing a dark hoodie along with a mask. In that moment, he takes something out from his pocket. I take off right there and then. I was thankful that this area was now decline, so I had the benefit of going faster. This guy just started chasing me like a madman, yelling at me and throwing things towards me. You can imagine just how I felt in that moment. It's essentially dark and I'm being chased by someone I don't even know. Instead of going to my house, I go all the way into town and write to officers. By now, that person had already left. I tell them about what had happened and they told me they would look into it. Nothing similar has happened to anyone since. There is a notice on their website and it says to be on a lookout for him, but so far, nothing. If anything comes up, I'll be sure to let you all know. Number 9. Alright, so I was told I should tell this story. So I thought, why not? Let's go ahead and tell it. Looking back, it was just so weird. But in that moment, me and my sister honestly thought it was the end. Possibly overreacting? Well, that's for you to decide. To take you back, me and my sister Samantha were out walking on a trail that was on the other side of town. It's right behind a shopping center and goes for about 5 miles until you reach a lake. From there, you turn around and you make your way back. We started our walk just like normal. We parked our car, stretched, grabbed some water, and started going onto the trail. One thing I did notice was this strange man who sat in a small field next to the parking. He just sat there minding his own business, but when I turned around, I noticed he was starting to circle around our car. I was almost thinking about going back and saying something, but I just thought he wanted to see it. Weird, but it was about to get even stranger. Me and my sister walk as we're listening to music and enjoying the nature around us. We saw a couple who was walking their dog, but other than that, we hadn't seen anyone else. This was later in the afternoon, so even though there was still sunlight left, we had enough light to get back before it got too dark. Eventually, we reach a bridge area that takes you into some small woods, then takes you to where the lake is. It just so happened that when I looked below the bridge, I saw that man I had seen from earlier. I'm guessing he must have taken one of the shortcuts as there were multiple in the area. As we cross the bridge expecting just to pass by him, he ends up meeting us on the other side. He stops right in front of us with mean eyes and just stares at us. Me and my sister were feeling pretty nervous at this point. He does eventually move out of the way, but it's not before he says to us, "It's a nice afternoon for a walk, although I don't think the two of you should be walking out here on your own. I haven't seen anyone else out here. It would be a shame if something happened. By the way, nice car. I left you a nice little surprise. I hope you'll like it." He just laughs after that and he goes back down. We knew right there and then he was up to no good and almost considered going back. Honestly, I thought he was joking around and I told my sister we shouldn't worry about it. We didn't make it to the lake after all, since we were second-guessing everything. We make it across the bridge area just fine, and now notice he was no longer there. This once again proved my idea that he was just some random person playing a joke on us. That was until we started getting closer to the parking area. Still, we hadn't seen anyone else on the trail. By now, it was already getting dark, so I was sure that's why we had seen no one. Suddenly, we started to hear sounds. I'm not talking about the sounds of squirrels or even birds. No, this sounded like someone was trying to hold in laughter. I found it strange, but when we turned around, it got even more stranger. Here was the guy from earlier. He seemed to have been on some sort of mission to get to us. Me and my sister take off running, and he starts following. We had a good lead ahead of him, so we did make it to the car in plenty of time. There was a problem, though. Remember the so-called surprise he told us he had for us? Well, as it turns out, he seemed to have put nails in the wheels. Also, there was a cut in one of them, and you can hear the air getting out. Obviously, I couldn't drive the car with these problems, so instead, we run over to the nearby shopping center. We found a security guard, and first thing we did was tell him about everything that had happened. He told me he was familiar with the person we had talked about, but said he had never done anything before. I'm guessing this was the first time he did something. We called AAA and officers, and he was eventually found a few days later. In the end, it turned out he was indeed responsible for what had happened. We've been back to that trail, but sometimes it's hard not to think about what happened before. Number 10. Alright, so I wanted to tell you about my little encounter when I was in the mountains. This takes place in Southern California. In fact, this happened to me, the narrator. I've told this story in the past, but I thought why not? There's a lot of new people here. I thought I'd go ahead and include it as an extra story. Let's just say that if you remember me telling this story, then not only have you been here for a long time, but you're amazing. So this happened back in January of 2017. You can find the footage and pictures on my Instagram. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, then you'll know I love running and going into the wilderness. That's why I have so many beautiful landscapes as background footage. Anyways, I was out backpacking in the wilderness, something I did quite frequently. On this specific day, I chose to go alone since my friends were busy. Normally, I'd advise that if anybody goes backpacking in the mountains, make sure you don't go on your own. I thought since I was brave and confident, I wouldn't have to worry. Looking back on it, it would have been nice to have somebody with me. Also, on a side note, don't ever go into the wilderness late in the afternoon, especially on a weekday. I began my walk going down a familiar trail, and that takes me down into a canyon. When I got to the bottom, I reached a crossroads. The trail goes two ways. One way went to an area called Carbon Canyon. The other went down a trail called Easy Street. Coincidentally, it was called Easy Street because it was a flat trail, and it went on for about 6 miles. I took Easy Street and made it towards the end without any problems. Well, no problems at least yet. When you reach the end, you reach an area called Four Corners. That takes you different ways. There is a bench area where people like going to have lunch and even make picnics there. It was a nice reward for walking around so much. In my time walking there, I was surrounded by mountains, fields of flowers, and old trees. When I did reach Four Corners, I stopped to have a sandwich, and then after I continued on. I walked past Four Corners. From there, I'd go up into the mountains where I could get a better view of the valley below me. This was when I first encountered something. As I made my way around a corner, I saw something in the trail ahead of me. I almost didn't see it, but I started hearing the sound of a rattle. I knew right away what it was. It was a rattlesnake. I froze. I'd always heard stories about encountering snakes, but I never knew how I would react when I would encounter one. I started sweating as I saw it staring back at me. I had to be careful not to make any sudden movements. Snakes can lunge at you at any given time, even if you're not close to them. Slowly, I started to back up, but then it started heading my way. I'll admit, in that moment, I thought it was going to attack. I started to pick up my pace as I now noticed it turned off the trail and went into the nearby trees. I waited until I no longer saw it, and then I continued on my way. That was the first wild encounter that I would have that afternoon. I did actually make it to the top of one of the nearby mountains, and I enjoyed the beautiful view. Once I had my fill, I made my way back down, making sure to be extra careful for snakes. I didn't encounter any more, thankfully, but I did run into another group of people. As it so turns out, they actually ran into a snake themselves. They warned me, telling me that there seemed to be a snake sunbathing, but of course they didn't bother it. I was already paranoid about the snake from earlier, but thank goodness I never did see one. That didn't mean I didn't see something else that sent a chill. As I was about a mile away reaching the crossroads, I noticed what looked to be something walking in the middle of the trail. At first I couldn't tell what it was, but it seemed to be walking towards me. I've heard stories about there being mountain lions here, and in that moment it was a real concern. Mountain lions are notorious for running fast. There was no way I was going to outrun one now. I had a backpack on me, so if I did have to run, I would have to drop it. As it continues going my way, I once again start backing up. Really, what else was I going to do? Turns out it wasn't a mountain lion, but another sort of feline. No, it turned out to be a bobcat of all things. At the time, I didn't have too much knowledge on bobcats, but I knew I had to be careful. After all, it was a wild animal. This little guy just casually walked by me like it was nothing. We sort of just stared at each other as it acknowledged me and continued on. With that, I continued to walk, and I noticed another group that was walking ahead of me. Quickly, I warned them about the mountain lion, but it turns out that they were the ones warning me. When I turned around, I now noticed my new bobcat friend was walking back towards me. One thing I knew for sure was you never have your back turned toward a wild animal. I stood my ground and I waited. Once again, it just casually walked by me. I realized now that I'd run into a friendly bobcat. I took out my phone and that's when I started recording. It was honestly a pretty nice experience in the end. Still, I was sure to be careful, but it was still neat nonetheless to be so close to one. Eventually, my new bobcat friend leaves and goes up into the mountains. I made it out of there just fine and have since returned back. Sadly, I haven't seen my new little bobcat friend, but at least I'll never forget it. Yes, not like the other stories, I know, but a fun little story to end our video. Thanks, I hope you enjoyed it. Well, hello there, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to hear more, then make sure you stay tuned. We have got plenty of more exciting adventures to tell, and I'm sure you won't want to miss it. As always, if you haven't done it already, then make sure you follow me on my social media. And do check out that merchandise, I know you're going to love it. But with that, I know it's the end of today's adventures, but we'll be back again next time with even more stories. Until then, have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.